Hello everyone and welcome to class this week. I'm excited to talk a little bit about online learning, something that I think is very important for your careers as instructional designers. It's something that you can't avoid knowing about. However you may feel personally about online education, there is so much happening in this space that you need to know about online education, about some of the issues, some of the people in this area, and then be able to form your own ideas about appropriate uses of online education for your own practice. So this presentation is meant to be a basic overview of online education. We can't talk about everything. I wish we could, and I don't want to get too long and too boring, so I'm going to try to just touch on some things as quickly as I can, just to give you a framework to understand some of the big issues in the field. So first, starting off with what is distance learning in a brief definition. This is from Michael Moore, who is the editor of the Handbook of Distance Education and also editor of the American Journal of Distance Education, founder of the many of the foundational theories of the field, including transactional distance, which we'll talk about in a minute. So he said that all planned learning that normally occurs in a different place from teaching, so you're separated by distance, requiring then some special techniques of course design and instruction, communication through various technologies, and special organizational and administrative arrangements. I like how he emphasizes here that the learning just being separated from the teaching is not sufficient to qualify it as distance learning, that there needs to be special techniques used to make this work effectively. And that's something that a lot of people forget unless they're well versed in this field and kind of have some experience in this field. We've seen quite a bit of tremendous exponential growth in the area of online and distance learning. Some of this data, I tried to get the most recent data I could, but from 2007, Moore found that about 100 dissertations a year were about this topic. I'm sure that's much higher now. There's been a group called the Babson Survey Research, and they've been tracking growth in online learning since 2002. So this graph shows their data going from 10% of total enrollments in 2002 to 2011 being about 30%, so about a third of enrollments in higher education now are online enrollments. So if you're going to work in higher education, you have to know about distance learning because it's just happening. Now, one thing I'll say about the Babson survey research, many people think that their data might be a little bit inflated just because of the way they estimate their numbers. So they estimate about 7 million in 2013, and that's where they get the 30%. The education department actually estimates more around 5.5 million, which people think is probably more accurate. So the number is a little bit less, but considering that this was 2011 at this point, yeah, we're up there a little bit higher now anyway. And this leads to a lot of hyperbole and things like this article online about the future of universities will be the digital degree. And as we've talked about in this class, there's been predictions for a long time about how books will go away, teachers will go away, television will make things obsolete, radio will make things obsolete, and now people are saying the same things about online learning, that it'll make traditional education go away completely. I don't know that I completely buy that. I think there will always be need to come together as learners and teachers in sometimes the same space to do certain kinds of learning. But I do agree with the fact that this is happening and it's being very disruptive in higher education and in K-12 education and is forcing us to think about education differently, which I think can be a very good thing. So looking at K-12 specifically, 2013 Inokul estimated that 31 states have full-time online schools and that there's about 1.8 million enrollments in 2009, but that's not counting the 200,000 students that are going to just online schools. The 1.8 million are people in traditional high schools and elementary schools and middle schools that also have an online course. But we've also got a growing number that are attending just fully online schools, including here in Utah, Mountain Heights Academy, formerly called the Open High School of Utah, which has been one of the highest performing high schools in the state. So they've been able to show that learning online can not only be convenient, but can also be effective if done correctly. And I really like some of the innovative things that they're doing in their model to try to make this online learning not be something where people get disengaged, where they get forgotten. They have a unique kind of shepherding approach for helping teachers to track students and connect with students in a human, way that they can actually feel like they're part of a class and part of a community. And so I like that about the Mountain Heights Academy. College Board Only 34% of school districts, this is what they say, that only 34% of school districts offer AP courses in these core subjects. And so you can see the need for online learning. I found this to be remarkable. I was astounded that so few schools offer AP and college prep types of courses, college curriculum types of courses. And so that's one reason why we need online education, is to help those students who are capable of doing this kind of learning but don't have the opportunities there at their own school for this kind of thing. The U.S. Department of Commerce in October 2010 estimated that 70% of households have broadband access, and that's grown, and that 72% of young kids have a computer at home. Now, just because they have a computer at home, they may not have sufficient computer access. That's one problem that we're finding here in Utah, for example. We have a much higher rate. Nearly every home in Utah has a computer, but a lot of these homes have 5 kids. And when all 5 kids have to use the computer at the same time to do their homework, you run into some problems. So when we talk about the digital divide, it's not just about having a computer in the home or having broadband access. It's about having enough devices for the kind of access that the students need to do their work. And we still need to do a little bit better in that area. This information comes from a blog post that I put on my website, and I think it's interesting. I've always wanted to publish this as an article, and I've never gotten around to it. But it talks about some of the periods of distance learning, and this is just my opinion. Other people have other ways of organizing this, so this is just my thoughts. But hopefully it gives you a way to think about the evolution of distance and online learning. So period 1 was very text-based. They called it correspondence learning. You would send a packet in the mail to a learner. They'd get the packet, they'd read the material, complete the assignments, and then mail it back to the teacher, who would then grade it. That still happens to some degree and in some places. So that's not, just because this was the first period of distance learning doesn't mean any of these things have gone away. Period 2 was computer-based instruction or computer-assisted instruction. This was distance education. It was more or less correspondence, but done with CD-ROMs and things like that. It was very bounded content, very linear progression through the material. It didn't have the capability that we have now with the internet of being able to just go off in lots of different directions. You pretty much had to just follow the next button and go next, next, next. And we still see some online learning like that. Although with the capability that we have in modern technology, this is not usually, I think, a very good way of doing online learning. Period 3 was distance transmission, which was basically correspondence model, but instead of using CD-ROMs and things like that, it was just internet transmitted materials. And then we started to get into the capability of the internet to support different kinds of interactions. And so then we had to focus on, and we still do to this day, on distance interaction and how we can create interactive learning spaces where people are talking to each other. And so we have concerns about whether a student can feel the presence, the online social presence of the instructor, whether they feel the social presence of their peers, and how we can feel like humans and in a community of inquiry together, and not just individuals working on materials. Period 5, the emergence of course management systems. Such as WebCT, which has now kind of gone away, and Blackboard, and now we've got Moodle and Sakai and all sorts of other ones in Learning Suite. The important thing to know about CMS is this made online learning accessible to nearly everybody. We went from just a kind of fringe kind of thing to now 95% or 100% of universities have CMSs. So pretty much every teacher is doing something online, whether it's just putting their syllabus online or some of their reading materials or their presentations online. And now we just kind of accept that as just normal, but that was a tremendous development in the ability to make it so that every teacher could teach some of their course online in some kind of a blended way. That made it very popular. Then period 6 was the read-write web, where things then became, instead of interested in just putting information on the internet and other people consuming that information, creating more constructivist types of approaches to online learning, where the emphasis wasn't just on consuming information, but creating information. So blogs and wikis and podcasts and YouTube, where you, the user, even if you were 6 years old, could create material on the web. And that created the opportunity for constructivist learning in online situations, which we didn't really have before as much. Period 7, we started to have this emphasis on open educational resources. And the emphasis here was on making quality materials more easily accessible to people so that we could bring the cost down of online learning and of learning in general. Um, we see an emphasis now on teachers developing their own open courseware that's very specific to their courses. So you can get stuff that's very customized. Instead of one textbook that's supposed to service 1,000 classes across the university, we have here in Utah science teachers creating their own science textbooks specifically for their students and using open resources to do that. That allows them to custom the textbook to the actual course that they're going to teach and how they're going to teach it. That makes it there's much more powerful. There's no more of this as we saw in Carpe Diem, what is that, Dead Poet Society, where the teacher asks them to just rip out, the first chapter of the book. If you don't want the first chapter, it just doesn't show up in your textbook anymore, and that's a really powerful idea. Open courseware is something you need to know about. That started at MIT, and that was the idea that you would put all of the courses that you've created and put them online so other people could work through MIT courses. And that was really popular at the time. It's now being replaced by this more kind of OER teacher developed, customized for the local setting. But there is still open courseware out there and still used, pretty heavily used. Period 8, we're starting to see also this movement towards mobile learning and increasingly mobile devices allowing us to have virtual reality mixing with real world reality so that people can be learning in the world with virtual material. And I don't think we fully scratched the surface of what that could mean for online learning. And then period 9, I'd be interested in what your thoughts are. What do you think the future is of online learning and what's going to be coming down in the future? Real quick, this is just a summary of some ideas from Terry Anderson, who's a big person in the field. He had an article in Ipt520 about distance education pedagogies and matches some of what we've talked in class, a transition from behaviorism to cognitivism to constructivism. But he also talks about here an idea of connectivism, which is important to know about in online learning. George Siemens and some other people have championed this idea. And the idea is that you learn not by yourself, but you learn as a networked community. And the whole goal is to create connections. You don't have to know things. You don't have to memorize things. You just have to know how to find things. How to find things in your networked, interacted community online. That's kind of a trippy idea, but something to know about and maybe to learn about a little bit more. Okay, finally, just some trends you just need to know about. The idea of transactional distance, which is the idea that that's the distance you feel in online class. It doesn't have to represent physical distance. You can be in a physical class, maybe in my class, and feel separated from the instructor, feel distance from the instructor. Particularly if you're in a class of 500 students, you may have greater transactional distance in a class in a face-to-face class of 500 students than you would feel in an online class of 10 students. So that idea that distance is really more of a psychological thing than a physical thing. Current trends also for online collaboration, communities of inquiry from Garrison, which is something you need to know about, which is the whole idea of social presence and instructor presence and cognitive presence and how we can feel present in a course even though we're separated. There's computer-supported collaborative learning, which from that journal. Cognitive and social cognitive effects. Blended learning, which Charles Graham here in our department is one of the leaders in the world on blended learning. Other people call it hybrid. I actually like Charles's term, blended. I think it's a better term, but hybrid is probably a more common term, unfortunately, so you need to know both words. And Charles can tell you more about blended learning. I think he has a presentation he'll give you as well. New interaction possibilities, the way to interact with people through video and audio, and maybe even eventually through augmented kinds of things, so that that transactional distance is less because of the ways that we can allow people to interact with each other. We're having more of a focus now, thankfully, on effective instructional design. We've gotten past the idea of, oh, this is cool and can save money, and now we're focusing more on instructional design. Although there's still quite a lot on commercialization of online learning with things like MOOCs, which, to be honest, a lot of it was very poor instructional design, but it was made to make a buck, and that's why we see MOOCs kind of failing now. There was a big push for them. Now they're starting to fall apart a little bit because they didn't have the instructional model underneath them. But we're also seeing the emergence of badges, which I can talk to you more about, and open education, things like Ipt520. And finally, just to wrap up, and I apologize for this long video. Long videos are poor instructional strategies in online learning, but had a lot to talk about. Just some key journals that you need to know about in this field. If you want to study this, I wanted to give you a place where you can go learn more. And also some of the key people that you need to know about in the field. Michael Moore, Terry Anderson, Dave Wiley, and Michael Barber in K-12 education.